Hello there, welcome to the Football Bloc. My name is Brandon, and today I'm joined here with Harry, and we are going to look back at the 2022 World Cup final. And what a final it was, with Argentina coming over top over France after a long game, 120 minutes plus a penalty shootout. It finished 3-3, 4-2 on penalties. What an absolutely crazy game. Harry, what are your initial reactions to the game? We'll get into play-by-play, looking at individual players and the whole run of the game, but just your immediate reaction once the referee blew that final whistle, once Gonzalo Montiel sent that last penalty into the goal. What was your final reaction, or your initial reaction,
I mean, that was a game of huge ups and downs, starting from like the 80th minute. The beginning of it was really boring and it was disappointing, especially the performance of some of the French players who'd taken off in the first half. But overall, it ended up being a thrilling game, probably one of the best games I've ever seen in my entire life. I mean, the only one that I can think of that tops that is the 2012 Champions League final between Chelsea and Bayern, but that's just because I'm biased as a Chelsea fan. So, I think this definitely also gave rise and, helped the argument that Messi is the greatest of all time, which disappoints me as someone who wanted to see Ronaldo win. And you also, you really can't overlook the performance of Kylian Mbappé, 23 years old. Now he's tied with Pele for the most number of goals scored at a World Cup. It's insane how much he's grown at just 23. He took the loss well, and it was just an amazing game overall.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, I've heard some people say that this is not only the best World Cup final of all time, but possibly the best game just in soccer in general. Now, I wouldn't go that far, because obviously there's a lot of games to compare that to, but this is definitely, in my opinion, the best World Cup final of all time. I don't think anything comes close. I mean, you look at 2018, overall that was kind of a disappointing final. I thought that Croatia outplayed France in the first half, and yet Croatia came away with the lead, and then they eventually just rode out the game. I thought it was a frustrating game. 2014 final, a lot of people didn't like it because it was really tense and just really close. But I personally thought it was a good good matchup end to end, or not necessarily end to end, but it was very very close, and there was a lot of tension there. Compare that to 2010, similar story there, although there was a lot more, I guess, football related incidents going on, a lot of like violence, challenges from the Dutch players, things like that. This tournament throughout, and including the final, I thought was just the best football. It was just beautiful to watch, fun to watch, and just pure excitement. There were so many good moments throughout this whole tournament, and then I think this final just really was a great cap on all of it, with that comeback at the end from Kylian Mbappé. You mentioned Mbappé there. That imagine scoring a hat trick in the World Cup final, and yet your team doesn't win. That's got to be frustrating. I think France overall was pretty bad, and we'll get into the each team and players in more in depth. But I think overall France was pretty bad. But Mbappe dragged them in within inches of winning their second World Cup in just 8 years, or 4 years. I mean, which is just crazy. And I think you mentioned it. Mbappe is already within. We're talking like top 50 best players of all time. He's already in that status, and who knows where he'll be by the end of his career. But all the accolades today, I would say, deservedly go to Messi, who, as you already alluded to, I think kind of solidified his spot as the greatest of all time.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's nothing else to say. He went and won the Copa America, and was it 2020?
2021, yeah.
Yeah, and then the World Cup after his loss in 2014, it just put on an incredible performance. With an Argentina team that's not necessarily a team of superstars, but they're just really cohesive, and they have this unity that, you don't really see in other squads. And to come back from a loss against Saudi Arabia in their first game, virtually humiliated and laughed at, and to see the performances of Messi throughout the tournament, scoring 7 goals, second only to Kylian Mbappé, was it was a joy to watch. As an Englishman, was I hoping that France would win? Yes, but I definitely just I'm speechless at how good Messi has been this entire World Cup, and at 35 years old nonetheless. And this comes after so many years of heartbreak, 3 losses in international tournaments before winning the Copa and then the World Cup, retiring from international football, the Don't Go Leo movement in Argentina. And, he really had to step up because you look at some players like Lautaro, he did not play well. Kind of like with France, Giroud and Griezmann were virtually absent for the entire game. Griezmann put on his worst performance at the World Cup probably, at least at this one. I know an article came out today from one of the major French newspapers. Forgot what it was called. Trying to think of the name of the newspaper, but I mean, they made it clear. Most of the French team was lackluster, carried by Mbappé, and not to disrespect the performances of the Argentinian players, who I think overall were very good. They could not have done this without Messi.
Oh yeah, and I'm going to disagree with you there on one point though about Griezmann. I think Griezmann was actually very good this tournament. I thought he played well. He had to switch his position. If you look at the last World Cup or like Euro 2016, he was just a primary goal scorer. He was in the position that Mbappé plays now, where he was out on the wing or drifted into the middle, but he would be the one that finished off the chances or gets the final pass, the assist, things like that. But because of Mbappé and also because of players like Dembele and Giroud, I think he really had to drop deep. He almost played as like an 8 or like a center mid, and he had 3 assists this tournament. I thought he did well. I thought he did pretty good in the final. I would say France up until about minute 79 or 78 was awful. They were garbage. I thought the only good player for France was Griezmann. But to your other points, I do agree. I think that France overall seemed kind of like a paper tiger in some sense throughout this tournament. They had some individual standouts. I thought Giroud had some good games. Dembele was good against Australia. Lloris was very good against both Morocco and England. But the whole team wasn't consistent. I thought defensively they were very weak. And really it was just Mbappe that carried them throughout the whole tournament. And then you can even say similar points to Argentina. Now, I think Argentina overall was better than France, but still, this might be a hot take. I don't think that this Argentina team is actually that good. I think that if you compare them to, say, 2010 Spain or 2014 Germany or 2006 Italy, I think they fall short. Now, what does hold up or what does compare to those other teams is just the performance of Messi. I think this tournament is characterized by not so much great team performances, but just individual performances where you see Messi and Mbappe. You can also argue like a Harry Kane or Bruno Fernandes. There was a ton of individual players that played well. And that's not to say that there was bad teams or not every team was bad. There was some obviously very good team displays. You saw Croatia, Morocco, but still, I think obviously the winner of the World Cup and the team that finished second place was two teams that were carried by their number 10s.
Yeah, and look, I don't necessarily think Argentina could have won if it wasn't for the path that they had. I mean, you're playing Australia in the round of 16. The Netherlands gave them a fight, but they had to go all the way to penalties. And then they played an aging Croatia side that really didn't deserve to be in the semifinal. Unfortunately, Brazil had a really bad game in the quarters at the Education Stadium. And in some ways I would look not just at Messi, but look at the performance of Martinez, their goalkeeper. He played amazingly. That save in the 120th minute literally saved their entire World Cup. And he's probably the number one goalkeeper in the world right now in a penalty shootout. Like, if you need a man to clutch up in a penalty shootout, you're looking at Martinez. The intimidation that he brings, tossing the ball away from the player instead of handing it to him. If you look at the way he was speaking to players in the Copa America, for example, saying, "You're going to miss, brother, you're going to miss, brother." And then they just miss, and you can't beat that. And, actually, I like the humbleness of him as well. He actually thanked England for being where he is now. He started at Oxford United, the local team, worked his way up, and now in his late 20s at Aston Villa, he's now one of the best goalies in the world. And switching back to what you were mentioning about Dembele, thought Dembele's performance today was disgraceful. Giving away a clumsy challenge in the box, a questionable one. Argentina certainly had plenty of questionable penalty decisions throughout the tournament. But he couldn't get up. The defense of Argentina was pretty solid at the beginning, and he had no answer to it. And this is going to be a hot take, but I think he's a B-rated striker. He's better off at Everton. He got overhyped at Dortmund. He doesn't play particularly well at Barcelona. He's not going to be remembered as like a world-class striker. And, I really would have preferred to see a France squad that had, Benzema and had Conte and had some of these missing players rather than this, kind of second choice squad in a lot of ways. And, last thing is certainly cannot understate how disappointing Lloris was that game. He's not really a shot stopper from close range. He's definitely not a penalty saver. He's a leader of men, but that's not what France needed. I think that if you actually took the two goalkeepers and switched them, the team with Martinez would have won.
Yeah, that's a hot take right there, and I don't know if I necessarily would disagree with that. Actually, you do bring up some good points especially about Emi Martinez. I got to say, once the match, I was rooting for Argentina, if you couldn't tell already, but once the match went to penalties, I wasn't really that scared. I was confident in Emi Martinez that he would save at least one. And that really showed to be true because Emi Martinez, as you were mentioning, is just almost unstoppable when it comes to penalties. You saw his performance against the Netherlands. I saw his performance against France here, and as well as his performance against Colombia in the Copa America. It was just a monster of a performance, and it really showed because he ended up, like you said, winning the game for Argentina, not just in a penalty shootout, but also that last-ditch save against Kolo Muani. He had some other individual performances throughout this tournament, such as that save against the Australian player. I forget who it was at the very end of the game. He had a bunch of great saves against the Netherlands in extra time. He's really shown up, and it's crazy to think that, just a year and a half ago, he was basically a backup goalkeeper at Arsenal. Then because of an injury to, I think it was Ramsdale, then he became the number one. Then he shot up to prominence, went to Aston Villa, became one of the best or most consistent keepers in the Premier League, and then showed up for Argentina at the Copa America. Now he's a World Cup champion. So, and I think that's crazy, and it's credit to the guy for really, really improving his game. But you already started going into it. Let's look at the French squad individually. Let's look at these individual players, specifically in the final. So you talked about Dembele, and I'm going to have to agree with you. Even as a Barcelona fan, I think that Dembele had an awful, awful performance today. I think he was the worst player on the field. He did absolutely nothing going forward. He was forced to defend. And I think a lot of that is just because of how good Argentina played, that a guy like Dembele is forced to defend. But still, when it comes to defending, he gave away that penalty. He got completely skinned by Di Maria there. And like I said, did absolutely nothing going forward. Giroud also did nothing. And then I thought Mbappé, up until the 77th minute, was also invisible. Now, granted, he's the kind of guy that he's so world-class. He's just oozing with world-class talent and skill that, he can be having not the best of a game, but then all he needs is one or two opportunities. But what did you think of Deschamps' gambling, in a certain sense, to take out Giroud and Dembele before halftime and putting Kolo Muani and Thuram? What did you think of that?
Well, I think it ended up being a good decision at the end of the day. I mean, Dembele, I'm not going to beat a dead horse here, but like you were saying, he was poor. Giroud, I was actually kind of surprised when he made the substitution. I didn't think he was going to come off because, he's a world-class striker. He's played really well this entire World Cup, so that was kind of a surprise for me. But I think it ended up being a good decision in hindsight because I think Kolo Muani particularly played really well, especially in extra time. He was really a threat. I think he was the one who also went down to give the penalty to Mbappe in the 71st minute, if I'm not mistaken, right? Thuram, I honestly did not really pay too much attention to his performance because it was kind of overshadowed by Kolo Muani's and Mbappe's. But I think it ended up being a good decision, like I said 1,000 times now. But also, Coman as well. Kingsley Coman had a great game. It's just really a shame that they couldn't, seal it at the end. They gave away, a cheap penalty at the beginning and an unfortunate second goal. And, I think if you started the game in the 45th minute, took away the first half and did a full game, if you took that France side from the second half, they would have won the game. It's just something about that first half performance that I can't quite describe. That, it was really uninspiring. It was really boring. I wasn't really paying attention too much to the game because I didn't really care to watch the team that I wanted to win play so poorly after all the hype. Mbappe went into the game with like 5 goals scored, and Giroud was also up there for a golden ball as a golden ball contender, and so I credit Deschamps with his decision making. Then another player that I want to talk about is Rafael Varane. I thought he had a good game. He's a solid defender. I think Upamecano played better. And I just think the weakness was down to that beginning, 41 minutes before they came off. Can't quite describe what happened. I don't know if maybe you have a better way to describe to someone who didn't watch the game what exactly happened. It just seemed weak.
Yeah, I would say that, I don't know, France looked uninspired, as you mentioned. They also looked just not up to the challenge. And I think part of that, or most of that, is just because of how good Argentina played. They came out the gate swinging. They really kind of intimidated and shocked France. They didn't get a goal until midway through the second half, but still, just the way they were playing, the ambition, the determination, the rigor that they were really showing, I think just kind of shut down France. And then, the occasion can kind of get to you. Yes, this French team, most of them were there 4 years ago, but still, a lot of these guys are really young. I mean, look at a guy like Tchouameni, look at a guy like Jules Koundé, or even Dembele. He didn't play in the final, even though he was in the squad 4 years ago. So I think, Argentina, the way they just kind of, for lack of a better term, they just intimidated France, and that completely just shut down their game plan. They weren't able to get the ball out to Mbappe. They weren't really able to get the ball to Dembele. And Giroud was just left out on an island because he's not a type of guy to, create chances on his own. He needs service. So and I would say I think France defensively has been pretty poor this tournament. I thought Upamecano did not really have that good of a game. I think he's had overall a poor tournament. I think Jules Koundé has had an okay tournament, but he had a poor game. And I would actually criticize Deschamps for starting Upamecano and not starting Konaté. I thought Konaté has been pretty good for France this tournament. Also, starting Rabiot, I'm not sure if that was the best decision. I don't think Rabiot was very good. Rabiot also missed training because he had the flu. There was a flu going around France's squad, which possibly could have contributed to their initially poor performance. But I also, going into specific players like Benzema, I think it was a bad decision to leave Benzema on the bench like that and not really call him up for the final. Now, as I understand, this whole situation is still kind of unfolding. We don't have all the information yet, but from what I understand, it seems that Benzema was injured, and then he was able to stay in the squad because his recovery time was still within the World Cup parameters. So if he recovered, he would be able to play in the final few games. But the French squad, as well as the Champs, didn't want him in the squad because some players don't like him, going back to that scandal he had a few years ago, as well as just the way that he operates within the team. And I will say I do think France play better with Giroud. I think France, especially Mbappe, the team just flows better with Giroud because he's a natural number 9 instead of a guy like Benzema who can kind of play as a number 10 in some ways. But in a match like this where Giroud is just off on an island because he's getting no service at all, the way Argentina is playing, this is the type of match that would be perfect for Giroud. Benzema. This would be the perfect time to put Benzema on. He's the guy that can create something. He thrives in these big moments. We saw last year he showed up in the Champions League final. He showed up in the quarterfinals, semifinals, round of 16 for Real Madrid. This game would have been perfect for him. And I know that Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, asked Benzema to come to this game, to suit up for the game, to get ready to be on the bench, to come off the bench, and then Benzema said no. And to be honest, I fully understand why Benzema said no, because even though Macron's asking him to be on the team, Deschamps and all his teammates in this French squad don't appreciate him. They didn't want him in the squad. So, why is he going to go there if he's going to a place he's not wanted? And I think a lot of this defeat falls on Deschamps for the Benzema situation, as well as not starting Konaté and also starting Dembele, who I think, Dembele's been kind of having he started off the tournament really well, but then his performance has kind of declined. Kolo Muani scored in the last game, and you mentioned how good he was in this game. I think he can argue he probably should have started in this match as well.
Yeah, again, going back to that shot right at the end, it was magical goalkeeping from Martinez to keep that out. Yeah, I'm not too familiar with the whole thing with Benzema from a few years ago. And I also don't think that him playing necessarily would have made anything different, because he would be entering into a system that had 6 World Cup games prior, and I don't know if he'd necessarily be able to handle the pressure coming back from injury, and having a team that doesn't revolve around him. You look at Real Madrid, and after Ronaldo left, it kind of left a hole that he sort of filled, and he became the centerpiece, and that's why he won the Ballon d'Or and he's dominated. But I don't think that the same thing would happen with the France national team. Now, going forward a few months, will he be able to play in the Euro qualifiers for France? Yeah, how might he perform there? We'll have to see if he even plays. But, for this World Cup, I think it ended up being the best decision for him to not play. I don't think it would have worked. I think it was just a bad day for France. The injuries were obviously disappointing. You're missing Paul Pogba, you're missing N'Golo Kante. There's a few other names that I can't quite think of right now. You're missing Benzema, obviously. If they had those names and they had the team that they needed, then I definitely think that they would have won, and simple as that. I don't even necessarily think that Argentina or France were the best teams at the tournament. I would say, up until they got eliminated, Brazil were looking like the best team at the tournament, just absolutely dominating. Morocco was a great team. They had solid defense until they just seemingly collapsed and conceded 4 goals in the semifinal and in the third place playoff. The Netherlands played great until they lost on penalties, with an unfortunate Van Dijk miss. Argentina, at the end of the day, if there's anything to take away, they won this World Cup by the skin of their teeth and by sheer will and determination, to give Messi what he has always dreamed of. They didn't play like world champions. As an England fan, I'm not afraid of England taking to the field with Argentina. There's not that, these are the world champions. I used to fear teams like Germany. You go back to 2010, 2014 Germany, they were feared on the pitch, and I don't see that same kind of fear for Argentina. Credit to them for winning. They, like you said, they were purely driven by drive and the will to win. But, I don't think they're going to be able to keep this up in 2026. I don't see them winning the next Copa. Neymar knows that, he might come back to the next World Cup. That's kind of like the whole mantle of desperation for winning a World Cup title goes from Messi. Ronaldo failed, goes from Messi to Neymar. So this isn't necessarily going to be an Argentina team that's going to be remembered, in my opinion. I'm not going to remember who De Paul was and who Paredes was. And, I might remember, the performance of Lautaro Martinez because he just hasn't played well. I'm going to remember Messi because he solidified himself as the GOAT. But, in a few years from now, if you ask me to name the Argentina team that beat France in the 2022 World Cup final, I'm just not going to really remember or care to remember, because all that's going to matter is that they somehow scraped together a victory. I'll remember the goalkeeper because he just had an amazing performance, and he had that funny gesture right at the end. Yeah, that's about it. I'm happy for Argentina. They got what they wanted, but this World Cup could have been anyone's, and could have been France's, could have been England's, could have been, Netherlands. Just wasn't, it was written in the stars for Messi from the beginning. And, if you go for an entire World Cup and get 7 penalties and a lot of decisions that could go 50-50 kind of go to you, it's hard to, it's hard to lose, if I do say so myself, So, congratulations, but, Argentina's not going to win something else for a very long time.
I will say, I think you're being a little too harsh here. I think that I will say Argentina was the best team at the tournament. Now, saying that, as I said before, I do think that this team doesn't stack up against Germany 2014, Spain 2010, Italy 2006. And in many ways, you can draw comparisons between this team and Maradona's team in 1986, where, if I were to ask you, like, can you name any other players on that team from 1986? Most people can't, unless you're an Argentinian or just like from that time period. The only other players I can think of off the top of my head is Jorge Valdano and Borruchaga, the guy that scored they scored in the final. And similarly with this team, I'm sure you fast forward like 20, 30 years and say like, hey, can you remember anyone from Argentina's 2022 squad? They'll be like, Messi and, Emi Martinez, Di Maria, and that'll probably be it. Because I think, as I mentioned before, this team, they did good enough, but they're not like an era-defining team. Now, Messi is an era-defining player, and he had an absolutely insane tournament, but this team overall did enough to win the tournament, but again, they're not to the level of some previous world champions. Now, when it comes to the other teams of this tournament, I don't think Brazil was at the level that they should have been at, and I think that's mainly down to the manager, Chiche. I think that Brazil defensively was very, very good, but going forward, there was no fluidity, there was no structure. It was kind of like the team was centered around defense, and then for the attack, the players kind of just are meant to do just their own thing. Like they went up there and just started to act as individuals, and that's how the team set up. And you can win the Copa America doing that, but you can't win the World Cup doing that. I mean, Brazil struggled to score against every team that they played against, with the exception of South Korea, and that's because South Korea just went toe to toe with them, and South Korea does not have the ability to defend well. Let's be honest, that team probably shouldn't have been in the round of 16. They deserved their spot there with that heroics against Portugal, but they probably shouldn't have been there. And it showed because they got completely destroyed by Brazil. But you look at a team like Croatia, I think Brazil, who was clearly a better team on paper and also just overall, they should have won that game pretty handedly, but instead they kind of sludged their way through the game. They eventually scored, but then I think arrogance crept in. I think another big problem with this Brazilian team is there's a lot of arrogance within them, and they underestimated Croatia. They kind of took their foot off the gas, and Croatia was able to get in there and score and go through on penalties. Similarly, you look at Netherlands. I think Netherlands was good enough. They had a fairly easy group and a relatively easy path to the quarterfinals. They played the U.S. I think the U.S. kind of had a bad game. And even still, the 3 goals that they scored were all from simple defensive mistakes. And then I don't think the Netherlands really impressed in the group stage. They did just enough. To the main point, I do think that Argentina was the best team of the tournament. But I think this team is more so due to Messi. Like you mentioned this before, you remove Messi from this team, I don't think that they win the tournament. But at the same time, if you remove Mbappé from France, I don't think they make it to the final. I think you remove Mbappé and Messi, we could be seeing a Morocco team in the final or something like that. Or I don't know, maybe England, maybe a team like the Netherlands or something like that. I think there were some other teams there that really kind of dropped the ball. Spain and Germany are 2 examples. Belgium and Denmark were very disappointing. But that's the joy of the World Cup overall. There's you have big surprises, you have unexpected things. I mean, who would have expected Morocco to just go and have the streak that they had, or who would have expected Croatia to really get this far as well. So that's the joy of this World Cup, and overall I thought it was an amazing World Cup. So
yeah, me too. This is not my favorite World Cup. I'm still going to say 2010 was my favorite. But this World Cup had unexpected turns, unexpected results. I mean, Morocco making it all the way to the semifinal before that heartbreaking loss. The performance of Mbappé and Messi, the disappointment of Brazil. You're totally right. They got arrogant. The coach started dancing with them when they were beating South Korea. Beating a South Korean side that scraped by is not something you should be doing in front of the world if you're then going to go lose to Croatia, which is an aging team, which doesn't have the players from last time. I know there's one key striker that they had in the last World Cup that they don't. Mario Mandzukic, they don't even have him anymore. They had an aging Modric, and then they go and lose in a penalty shootout. Rodrigo misses his penalty kick. Neymar doesn't even take one because I guess he's waiting to be the hero to take the 5th kick. Whereas a Messi stands up, takes the first kick, and he leaves the rest to his team. And we are an American channel, I guess. Brandon, you are from the United States.
Of course,
Quickly diverting to the United States. They had a bit of a disappointing World Cup, but they showed that their young players, have big things ahead of them. Christian Pulisic, Tim Weah, Musa, Brendan Aronson, Matt Turner with a amazing goalkeeping performance. Holding England to a 0-0 draw. Sure, they only scored one against Iran and they drew against Wales, who was, not very good. But they put up a fight, The loss to the Netherlands was definitely a shame, and that's one of the reasons why I think the Netherlands was actually a very good team at the World Cup, because they beat, a pretty strong United States squad 3-1 after, kind of a low-scoring group stage, but they could have easily beaten, Argentina in the quarterfinals, and they left it to penalties when you're going to face the wall that is Martinez. For the United States it's disappointing, but we made it to the round of 16. We didn't even qualify in 2018. So I think we're going to see big things in 26. You got 48 teams. There's going to be a lot more. There's going to be a lot more African teams. We might see surprise performances there from a Morocco or a even potentially an Ivory Coast or a Ghana or someone, a team along those lines. Another team from South America, you get Peru in there, potentially like Colombia again. Colombia needs to make their return. Chile needs to make their return. And, we're missing giants in Europe. We're missing Italy. It's a big loss when we don't have Italy, we don't have Sweden. So I think the next World Cup's going to be really exciting with all these teams. Do I necessarily like that there's going to be 48 in the system? Not really. I think it's generally quite corrupt, the way that they came about making the new system for 2026. But as a fan, as a not just necessarily a casual viewer, but as one who is really wants to see England perform well in the United States, I'm excited to see what's going to happen. I think next, and I'll definitely be going to one of the games. Football Bloc will be attending.
Of course.
Yeah. So it's been a great World Cup. Marred by its issues with human rights and with migrant workers and forms of discrimination, controversies, but regardless of the political stuff, that at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. We're talking about a multi-billion-dollar, FIFA, and no one's perfect, but Qatar put on a show, and the magical man Messi put on the performance of his lifetime and came away with the dream that he's always had.
Yeah, I do think that a lot of people criticize this tournament in the build-up up until the tournament even started, and I think a lot of those people ended up being wrong because, this World Cup ended up being a wonderful World Cup. I got to be honest, I think this might be the best World Cup that I've seen. Now, I should take a little longer to kind of wait for that retrospective, concept to set in, because 2014 was a really good World Cup, and there's a lot of nostalgia around that. But I think that this might be the best I've ever seen. As for the U.S. team, I think that we had a good performance overall. I do think that we did well. We could have done better, and I think the way the tournament ended was kind of a disappointment against the Netherlands. Not that I expected the U.S. to beat the Netherlands, but I think the way we lost in that, it was those 3 goals were all from very avoidable, very preventable mistakes, just poor marking in the box, not watching those late runners. But it was a tough group for our standards. The draw against Wales, I thought the U.S. played really well in that game, but Gareth Bale showed up. One of my least favorite players, Gareth Bale, considering how he scores against the U.S., he scores against Barcelona, he scores against the Philadelphia Union. I just cannot get away from this guy. That overall, I think it was a good performance from the U.S., even though we should have won. And then it was a good performance for the U.S. against England. I thought that England played really odd. I was not expecting England to kind of shut down like that, and I thought the U.S. played really well. It's like a preview of how good this U.S. team can be once these players continue getting better, more experience, and I thought it was a solid performance against Iran. Iran made it really tough in that second half, but they were fighting for their lives. But overall, the U.S. was a better team, and then, like I said, it was kind of disappointing against the Netherlands, but still, overall good performance, and I'm very excited for 2026, considering these players seem to be on very, very promising upward projections. And then, yeah, for the 2026 World Cup in general, I am obviously it's a World Cup. I don't think that there exists such a thing as a bad World Cup. But I gotta say, I don't know about the 48 team format. I think 32 is the perfect amount. We have 8 groups of 4. I think that's fine. The top 2 teams go through. You have a round of 16. Now we're going to have like a round of 32. There's going to be groups of 3, which means that we'll probably have to have penalty shootouts to decide draws in the group stage. So, you're talking about another, 16 more teams? There's going to be a lot of teams that are just physically weak, and they're just, if they know that they can potentially win through a penalty shootout in the group stage, are just going to sit back and defend. I think we can probably see like a repeat of 1990, where it's just a bunch of boring defensive games. Now, I hope that doesn't happen. Who knows? I also heard that the 48 team format is not set in stone, which could be interesting to see as we get closer to the World Cup what they eventually decide to do. But there are some plus sides. Obviously, I think Africa gets gypped a lot of times with this current format. I think Asia is fine right now, because Asia only gets a certain amount of squads, or a certain amount of spots for their squads. And to be honest, I think, Asia gets 4 spots.
I think like 4.5.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think that there's only 4 top-class teams in Asia. No disrespect to other Asian teams, but I think there's, really Australia, Japan, South Korea, Saudi Arabia, Iran. I think that's pretty much it. You can maybe throw in Qatar in there, maybe throw in another team, but that's pretty much it. Versus Africa, I think Africa gets really hard done by. You look at Egypt and Senegal, the 2 best teams in Africa. They had to face off against each other with only one of those teams going to the World Cup. That is unfair. The fact that you have the 2 best teams in your continent and only one space between them. Like, imagine Brazil and Argentina having to face off and only one of them goes to the World Cup. There's a bunch of other good teams that didn't make it from Africa as well. You look at Nigeria, look at Algeria. There's a bunch of other good teams. So I think the 48 team format will benefit Africa, but at the same time, we're going to see some pretty poor North American teams, some pretty poor Asian teams, and it'll also take a lot of the fun away from the qualification cycle in South America, because one of the reasons South American qualifying is so tough is because there's only 10 countries and there's only 4.5 spots open. So that means that inevitably a decent team, or potentially even a big team, is going to have to sit out. I mean, we saw in this tournament, both Colombia and Chile didn't make it. Back in 2018, Chile didn't make it, and they were the reigning champions of South America at the time. So, I think that if they expand it, it's going to be potentially, maybe 6 spots for South America, maybe even 7. So then all you have to do is just, not be as bad as Venezuela and Bolivia, and you're basically guaranteed a spot at the World Cup. And that's going to take a lot of the fun out of it. So, but who knows? I'm sure a lot of people had these same accusations when they expanded it from 24 teams to 32, or from 16 to 24 decades ago, and they're like, oh, it's we're just going to see more bad teams or stuff like that. So who knows? It could turn out well. But I like to be optimistic. So hopefully it does turn out well.
Yeah, 100%. That's all you can hope for in football, is that good things happen and that the right teams make it. And that's why we watch it. We watch it for the enjoyment.
Yeah. All right. So to close it up, to maybe go on to our last few points, what would you say, or who do you think was the standout performers from this World Cup? And just in general, I'm talking players, teams, maybe even something else like, I don't know, a stadium, maybe the ball, one of the World Cup songs, a World Cup jersey. What do you think was just one of the some of the best things, the standout things, the things that will last in memory when you think of the 2022 World Cup in Qatar?
I think the first thing that comes to mind would be Stadium 974, built completely out of shipping containers. And, it's interesting because I read somewhere that the Uruguay ticket for the 2030 World Cup, they're saying that they might actually deconstruct that stadium, ship it over to Uruguay, and rebuild it. And I just think that's fascinating to me that they'd be able to do that. Obviously, performances of Messi and Mbappé were incredible. 8 and 7 goals, it's undeniable that Mbappe is on the rise. He'll be one of the greatest, and Messi, is the greatest. And I guess for me, Ronaldo's performance or lack thereof was probably the most disappointing part of this World Cup. And it's not too surprising because he started off his season at Manchester United pretty poorly. He scored I think one goal in the Europa League on on a penalty or something like that. Not entirely sure. And we were expecting big things, and then Portugal goes and destroys their opponent in Switzerland without Ronaldo. Sort of felt more like a passing of the torch away from him. So we'll have to see where he goes. I wish the best for him. I personally think he's one of the greatest, if not the greatest of all time. Unfortunately, Messi is always going to be in that conversation. And I guess for me, the last one is the performance of England, particularly Jude Bellingham, only 19 years old, got a great eye. He's going to be very sought after this summer. I think Liverpool is his biggest suitor at the moment. He played some incredible football. Bukayo Saka, Marcus Rashford. Who expected Marcus Rashford to do as well as he's done this season? I don't think anyone has. He's been a total standout for me. Disappointment in Harry Kane missing that penalty against France to essentially get England eliminated. And the strong performance of Harry Maguire. Started off poorly this season, Manchester United being dropped by Van Gaal. Probably one of the worst players there, replaced by Martinez and Varane. He played really well, and England won the Fair Play Award, so I'm proud of England. Overall it was a great World Cup.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think the standouts that I would say is, like you mentioned, obviously, performances of Messi and Mbappe. You cannot overlook that. Like you said, 8 goals and 7 goals, 15 goals between just these two players. That is insane, and that's not even mentioning the assists that they had or just the individual dribbles, other things like that. I thought it was a great performance for those two. I would also say the way that the matches flowed, like some of the comebacks, some of the crazy moments. I mean, we just saw in the final how France came back, how the Dutch came back. There was just so many absolutely insane moments there throughout the knockout stages. I mean, that France versus England game was really fun to watch. I mean, the way that Croatia was able to shock Brazil, Japan beating both Germany and Spain, Morocco's run all the way to the final, Morocco eliminating both Spain and Portugal. I would say disappointments, Denmark, I think, was the biggest disappointment. I expected a lot of them. I thought they were going to be really good. I thought they were going to be a fun team to watch. They were awful. They were pretty poor. They could not score for the life of them. And then, you already mentioned this, but Ronaldo, man, and I'm not so much disappointed in him. I think that his situation with his, obviously he's getting older. His age is catching up with him. But I think his form at Manchester United, or his situation with Manchester United, as well as his unfortunate family situation with his kids, one of his kids passing away, and his other kid being in the hospital. I think that just put him in the wrong mindset for this World Cup. I mean, he had to go into the World Cup dealing with all this controversy around the way the club is treating him. I'm sure he's got a lot of pressure at home. His mind is not clearly set on the World Cup. Compare that to Messi. Virtually everything's going perfect for Messi. The way PSG's playing, the way he's playing for PSG, he was able to just go into the World Cup with a clear set mind, clear goal, whereas Ronaldo had all this other stuff packed on there. And it's not. I don't really think it's necessarily his fault. And the Ronaldo of old, Ronaldo in say 2014 or Ronaldo in say 2016, he would be able to deal with all this extra controversy and have a good tournament. But this Ronaldo, you add on the fact that he's getting a little old. He doesn't have the same clinical nature about him. He's not as fast. It just all kind of rolled up into being kind of a disappointing tournament for him. It wasn't all disappointing. He was able to break a few records. He's the first guy to score at, I think, 5 World Cups. He made he broke an appearance record. I forget what it was off the top of my head. And I don't think he was awful. A lot of people were criticizing him. I thought he looked good against Uruguay. I thought he looked great coming off the bench against both Switzerland and Morocco. He was just unfortunate not to score. But still, it was sad to see him go out like that for his last ever World Cup. My dream was the Portugal versus Argentina final. And also as a person of Portuguese descent, it was really sad to see Portugal go out like that, and also just the heartbreak for Ronaldo, watching him leave through the tunnel in tears. That was probably the saddest moment of the World Cup, in my opinion. I think it was even sadder than the U.S. getting eliminated, because, yes, even as an American, it was sad to see the U.S. go. I kind of knew that they were going to lose to the Netherlands. I didn't really expect them to go on that far. Versus Ronaldo and Portugal. Once Portugal beat Switzerland, I was like, all right, Argentina versus Portugal final. It's set in stone. It's coming. It's inevitable. And then yet they lose to Morocco. And credit to Morocco, I think they deserve to win. But still, that was heartbreaking, So, but anyway, I think we've had a great discussion so far. We went over a lot of things from individual players in the final to how good Messi and Mbappe have been, as well as looking ahead to 2026 and looking back at this tournament as a whole. Like I said, I thought it was a great discussion. Harry, do you have any final thoughts?
No, I just I appreciate being back on the football block, and I hope we can meet in person sometime soon and do something related to Euro 24, because I definitely got some thoughts about those qualifiers.
Of course. And, of course, it's great to have you back on the channel. Thank you, as always. But anyway, guys, let us know in the comments below what you thought of our discussion. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Both of us had some pretty hot takes. So what are your thoughts on those? Make sure to leave them in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Share this video with a friend. But anyway, my name is Brandon. You've been joined here with Harry as well. This has been the Football Block. Hope you guys have a nice rest of your night.
Go!